What's up, guys? Welcome back to another daily Bible reading snapshot. Today we're looking at 1 Chronicles 17 and 18. As we continue the story of David's life, one very important thing comes up here that we see in 2 Samuel 7. You might know it from there. It's really famous. It's called the Davidic covenant. And basically that's a fancy terminology for God makes a promise to David. So Davidic means David. Covenant means promise. So God makes this promise to David, not the other way around. It's not David making a promise to God. It's God promising something for David. So you know that's always a better deal if God promises something than when people promise something. So God is going to promise something and then fulfill it. And here's what it is. It's that he's going to establish the kingdom of his household. So God's going to build him a household, not just a house with four walls. He's going to build them a family. And when he does that, he's going to establish them as kings over his people. And it says not just for a little bit, but forever. And now, as we've already read Kings, you might say, wait a minute, what about the time when when these people are not going to be reigning? What about Zedekiah? What about even Rehoboam and the kingdom splitting? Well, it says that this kingdom is going to be established forever, which is pointing forward to a person that has to reign forever. And who do you think that person might be? The person who's going to come from David's lineage and reign as king forever. Who do you think that might be? You think that might be the one that's promised in Isaiah chapter 7 and Isaiah 9 and Isaiah 53? You would get that right. Yes, it's all about Jesus here. That's the full fulfillment. In the short term, we're going to see how David's sons are going to reign. Specifically, Solomon is going to reign as king. And David's response to that is exactly what it should be. It's, who am I that you would make this promise to me? It's not that he's impressive or amazing that God makes this promise. It's because God set his love on him. God chose to be good to David and to promise this to David. And just like with a lot of God's promises, it's not like the people who get the promise deserve the promise. In fact, the promise is grace in itself. This is a gracious gift that God is giving David to promise to put his sons on the throne and also to have someone reign forever and ever. So that's chapter 17. That's the Davidic covenant. In chapter 18 here, we see David defeating his enemies. We see him just defeating people like the Moabites, like the Edomites. We see people like the Syrians and the Ammonites in chapter 19 that he's defeating. And we see a lot of good things here. David is good to reign over his kingdom when he is following God. And that's kind of the big overarching principle. We see that in a lot of different ways. That whenever these kings are serving God, God's going to give them victory. And that's what we get here in chapter 19. So 1 Chronicles 17, 18, 19, all about David, all about the Davidic covenant, all about our need for a king that reigns forever, and really about the goodness of God in providing that king. And as we talk about that king, in John chapter 10, where we're looking at today, we see that king. We see King Jesus, who is described here by himself as the door of the sheepfold and also the shepherd of the sheep. Now, who are the sheep? Well, the sheep are God's people. He gives this illustration here in the first 6 verses, really the first 5 verses. Verse 6 says, this figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they didn't understand what he was saying. And this figure of speech basically is, we've got a group of sheep and we've got a shepherd. And he says about himself, Jesus says 2 things. I am the door of the sheep. I'm the one that can bring people in and out. I'm the passageway, which shows us the only way to get into God's flock is to go through Jesus. He's the only method. He's the only way of salvation. You can't come to God unless you come through Jesus, the door. Then he says, I'm not just the door, I'm also the good shepherd. And the shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Really, the good shepherd is going to lay down his life for the sheep. What does that mean? How does the shepherd lay down his life for the sheep? Well, in practical terms, shepherds today and back then, they lay down their lives for the sheep all the time. They don't always die for their sheep, but they spend their life protecting the sheep, being good to them, leading them. That's what Jesus promises. But even more than that, in verse 14, he says, I'm the good shepherd, and I know my own people. I know who they are, and they know me. And he says later that the Father loves them because he's going to lay down his life and he's going to take it back up again. So clearly this is pointing towards the death of Jesus. Jesus says, I have the authority to lay down my life, to let myself be killed by others, and then to take back up my life. No one else has that authority. Do you have that authority? You don't have that authority. You can't lay down your life and then take it back up whenever you want, but Jesus does. And that's what he's saying. He is the fulfillment of the Davidic covenant. He's the fulfillment of the good shepherd, the one that you need to lead you in life. Just even like how David in his life was kind of like a shepherd, because he was a shepherd with sheep, then he would be called to shepherd the people of God, the flock of God. In a greater, better way, Jesus is the good shepherd, and he's going to lay down his life for the sheep. Now, the response to all of that is what you would expect in the Gospel of John. Division. Some people embrace him, some reject him. Look in verse 19. It says there's a division among the people because of these words. Many said he's a demon. He's crazy. He's insane. Why would anybody listen to him? But then other people said, are these the words of a demon? Can a demon really open the eyes of the blind? Really? Demons don't do miracles like that. They don't have the power to do that. Only God does. So seemingly, the works were supposed to confirm the words of Jesus. That's another pattern we see in John. Jesus actually himself points back to the works. He says, if you don't believe my words, just look at the works. And then say, the works, yeah, we should believe the words that Jesus is saying, because look at the works he's doing. And we see that again here today. So, Jesus is the good shepherd. He's the one we need. And thankfully, he is your shepherd if you're following him. So hopefully we're following him today and following him closer than we usually do. Let's make sure we commit to that today. So we'll see you back tomorrow for another daily Bible reading snapshot.